Andrew Armstrong, and I have a business, Armstrong Lutherie, and I also run the Australian Guitar Making School here in Brisbane. Hannah's come in today, and we're doing a few things to her guitar, but what I'd like to run through is how we change strings. I'll give you some ideas about how to change strings, because that's, funnily enough, something every guitarist has to do, but not everyone's clear about the best way to do it. So we're missing a couple already, but the first thing you've got to do is take your strings off, and I say take all the strings off, don't just take one off at a time. I've made this little wooden block, and I like to keep my bridge pins in order. Now, it's not absolutely necessary to do this, but I guess if you change your strings often enough, you might want to think about it. So the reason I do that is because the strings actually wear these slots in the string pins out, and particularly on the E and the A string, because those strings are bigger, and you don't want to, keep moving them around and get the pins all kind of worn differently. So if they stay in the same holes, that's a good outcome. So just give me a second, I'll get these strings out of the way. If you don't have a power winder, get yourself one of those hand winders. They're fantastic for doing this. And then as soon as you've got the tension off, you should be able to pull the pins out. Another reason to take all the strings off is that rather than do it one at a time, is it gives you a chance to clean your guitar. This area here in front of the bridge and on the soundboard, it gets covered in dust and muck. And this area of your headstock is also an area that is hard to clean when you've got your strings on. So take the opportunity. You might also think about cleaning your fretboard. I like to, at least a couple of times a year, get some lemon oil or something like that and rub it over the fretboard. We're not going to do that today because this is a newish guitar, and we did it not so long ago. So give it a clean, have a look at it, make sure there's nothing untoward, and we're ready to start changing the strings. Now, we're doing a steel string guitar today. Totally different story if you're going to do nylon strings. So we're not talking nylon string here. This is only for steel strings, and it's only for steel string guitars that use bridge pins. If you have one of those guitars like an Ovation or some of the others, they load through the back of the bridge. You don't have to do this little bit that I'm about to explain. So I start on the bass string, bass E string. This string goes down through the hole, and this little thing on the end, which is called a ball end, that actually has to come up and sit against a piece of wood that's on the inside of the guitar called the bridge plate. And when it sits up there and the pin's in, it's not sitting under the end of the pin like that. It's actually sitting up, probably about in that situation. And so it's sitting alongside, and you want the ball end of the string to sit in that position. So it's just sitting forward and it's oriented like that. So the way to help it get into that position is to simply bend the end before you put it in the guitar. Just a little kink like this will work. And then you want to put it in the hole in the bridge so that when it's in there, it's pointing forward towards the sound hole. You put it in, and then I put the bridge pin in, and as I'm putting it down, I pull this up so I can feel that it's actually sitting against the bridge plate. If you've got a mirror one day, put it inside the guitar and have a look and see how all the string ends are sitting against the bridge pins. I like to put them all in and make sure they're all sitting in place before I start winding them onto the machine heads. The good folk at D'Addario who make these strings, they colour code the ball ends. Not every band does that, but make sure you put the right string in the right hole. I've got them mixed up in the past, and that's unfortunate. You end up with sometimes the strings being kinked in the wrong place up there, up against the bridge plate. Nice. There's that little kink forward again, in the hole, follow it with the bridge pin, make sure it's up there. Another thing I sometimes do is on the end of the bridge pin, you'll see there's a little bevel on these. So that's actually pretty good. Some of them are actually just got a dead flat end on it. And if you just poke it in straight and you push it down, the ball end can actually get caught under the end. And when you least expect it, and you've tightened, you're tuning your guitar, it'll pop out and it'll slide up and twang against the bottom of the bridge plate. Everyone thinks their string's about to break when that happens. Okay, the strings are in. Next thing I like to do is make sure that the holes in my tuner's machine heads line up in the direction of the string, so the holes are all lined up this way. That just makes it a whole lot easier for this next little step I'm going to show you, getting your strings wound on. Okay. This nut's loose on this guitar. It normally isn't. We're in the process of repairing it, so we'll have that glued down here soon. Now the thing is, how much do you need to wind on? And do you need to tie knots or loop it under? The answer is no, you don't have to do anything fancy. All you need to do is just have 2 or 3 wraps on the string post. So how do we get 2 or 3? We need about this much. So I pull the string through until it's straight and tight. Some people like to use about the distance between the tuner posts. The trouble is when you get out to this one, there's no tuner post to line up against. So I typically just grab it somewhere near the nut, between my finger and thumb, pull it back to the first fret. That's about this much, that's good enough. We'll have to glue this on. Hold it down, and then I start to wind. And I make sure that as the string comes around, this piece, the loose end, goes over the top. There's no need to wrap it round and fold it under or do anything fancy with it. And I typically just kink it up so it stays out of the way. And as we wind the string on, make sure that the string is winding on the bottom underneath, so that as it comes tight it pushes up, and what it'll do is it'll lock against the end coming through the hole there and automatically lock the string in place. But if you can get about 2.5 wraps just like that on your string post, that's all you need. The string's never going to slip, never going to move. And if you end up with lots and lots of wraps on there, it can mess up your tuning. Strings will go out of tune because they're not tight. Next one, through the hole, grab it at the nut, pull it back to the first fret, hold it there. Wind it on. We'll just get these other 5 done. Another thing to do while you've got your strings off is make sure that all the nuts and the ends of your tuning machines are tight. Sometimes they come loose. Once again, make sure that this loose end wraps over the top, not underneath. That's what this finger's doing, keeping the string down. The back. Now, some people might think you've got to have more windings around the post with the unwound strings, the two treble strings. And it probably is a good idea to have a few extra winds, but as the strings are getting thinner, they're actually going to naturally wind on more than the thicker bass strings. So pulling it back about the same amount works just fine. So I don't know whether you can see, but there's probably about 4 wraps on that tuner post. So compared to the wound strings, which only need 2 or 3, This one's got about 4, and I pulled it back the same amount, so it just takes care of itself. Pull it tight, back to the first fret, hold it down. You want to get rid of all of these things. I see people with all kinds of arrangements. They're just dangerous. I clip them off fairly close to the top of the post. And it's done. All that's left to do now is to tune it up. Got it. Haven't got one, you really should get one of these guitar tuning apps.
That one's Guitar Tuna.
This one's called Guitar Tuner, T-U-N-A. It's good. The thing about this one is that you get to select the string. So when you want to tune this string, which is the B string, you click on that. It actually tells you what it should sound like. And then the little thing tells you when it's in tune. So if you're new to guitar and you're just not sure what a string should sound like, this is a great app. The one I personally use, I think it's free as well. Is that right, Hannah?
Yeah,
free? Yeah.
it's free.
And that makes it good. The one I personally use is called Clear Tune, but you have to pay for it, but it's a terrific tuner. Maybe not quite as simple as that, but it's a great tuner. So now I'm just going to go back. New strings will always stretch. So I bring them up to tune again. Doesn't have to be perfect at the moment. The next thing I do in order to make sure your new strings stay in tune and don't go out on you, which is really frustrating, is just take the string and just hold it and tweak it between finger and thumb. What you're doing is stretching it. And I just work my way along the string all the way down. Maybe give it a press here. Give it another one. Pull it back up to tune. Do it again. And just do that for all of your strings, and you can then go and play confidently knowing that it's going to stay in tune. Now, sure, it's going to maybe move a little bit, but it'll substantially stay in tune and not keep going out of tune on you. And if you want to tune the A string, don't turn the E string knob, which I just did. So do that for all the strings and I think the job's done. So good luck with your string changing and happy playing.